let's begin with this us, with this conversation, just by saying our names so that we're all registering our here-ness in whatever way we want to. And you can call yourself by any name that feels right to you. And I wonder if Isabel, if you would call on people just their first names, so that we can, or shall we, or in the spirit of conversation, should we just have people say their names?
Whatever words. So there's only one person who's on the phone who would not know where we are. Everybody else can see who has gone. I'm comfortable with either way. Can I just invite the person who's on the phone to like be first, maybe, because we can see, and then I'll rename that person. The 917.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, it's Jane Truehold, and I'm about to come back in by regular Zoom, but I'm running another Zoom meeting at the same time, and until I could turn that meeting over to the host, to another host, I had to stay on that meeting. So, but I think she's here, so I'll be able to. I'll come in. You'll see me in a minute.
Okay, thank you, Jane.
Okay, Isabel, thank you.
All right. Jonathan, if you're ready.
I am Jonathan.
Laura.
Adette.
Arnold.
BJ.
Clara.
Paula.
Rachel.
Martha.
You say again, Martha.
Martha.
Yoka.
Elizabeth.
Jim. Mary. Noor.
Lisa.
Abby.
Bahar. Kati.
Roberto.
Ginevra. Susan.
Shekufe.
Is that all of us?
I'm missing Moni.
Ah, welcome.
Diane.
Are we missing anybody?
Olivia.
Olivia. Okay, let's just see how it feels now with each of us having spoken. How the atmosphere feels, how it feels inside. Sort of registering all of the voices that are us now. The ingredients of our conversation. The ingredients of our exploration. Conversation has been really important to me since I was a young person. I was quite isolated as a child, and then when I went to college, And I discovered that people actually talked about things. They cared about things. People would stay up all night talking about things like free will and determinism, or they would talk about things like racism, or things like religion, or things like what relationship was, all kinds of things. But it wasn't the things that we talked about. It wasn't the subject matter. It was the experience of wanting to stay up all night to have the conversation, wanting, even if there was an exam and you should be studying for the exam, that the conversation was more important, that you didn't want to miss it. And then other times in my life, all through my life, those moments of real conversation have been highlights of my life. And the feeling that there's something alive and growing and changing and on the edge. It's such an experience of being together in some creative evolution and seeing moment to moment how it's opening up and being surprised, not knowing what's going to come or how it will come out. These are the conversations that are not about who is right and who is wrong. These are the conversations that are not about blowing off steam, or not really even about coming to a final conclusion. These are the kinds of conversations that are about getting to know more of other people, of oneself, of the flow of the large conversation. I like what Ghanima says about the highest principle is this, to hold oneself open to the conversation. And for Ghanima, and I sent you a lot of his quotes, I hope you like them. For Ghanima, the conversation is in sort of capital letters. It's a big thing. And so the conversation is something that has a special role in moving us forward, in connecting us, in growing us, in stretching us. And I'm wondering what it is for you when you think of the living conversation, what comes to you. So maybe just take a moment and a couple of breaths and see what does it mean to you? What role does it have in your life? What do you want from conversation? And just see if there are any images or metaphors or words or sentence that capture something about it for you. It might even just be a question. Raise your hands when you have that thing for you, what it is for you right now. And of course, as in all of focusing, it's going to change, and it has changed. And this is this moment, a snapshot of what it is for you. One of the things about conversation is the experience of how our inner world is not just inside us, how our inner world is also outer, and how everything in our environment, in the us, is also inside us. And I'm going to invite you to do a short exercise with me in breakout rooms, and we're going to be in groups of 3. And what I'd like to invite you to do here in this breakout room is just share what came to you about conversation. And then pause, take a couple of breaths, and then the next person shares. and then the next person shares. And then we go back to sensing inside what conversation means now after hearing the sharing. Does everybody have that? Does that seem simple enough? Does that seem like, I know it can get confusing in breakout rooms. But I think that Isabel can also put that in the chat, that we're just going to share that image that came in the focusing, and each person will share with a few breaths, not responses, but just a few breaths in between, and then focus again about it and have each person share. So we're going to have 2 periods of sharing, and then see what it does inside to hear other people sharing. Okay, everybody have that? And this
Oh, I
will
think
be
I
just
understood
15
something.
minutes.
So we share, pause, share, pause, focus again, share, pause, share, pause.
Right, and then
Okay.
we'll talk about it all together. Very good. So this will just be 15 minutes of just seeing how other people sharing impacts what's inside you, and just finding that focusing place in you, and then seeing what, as each person shares, what that does inside you and what's there then, and then hearing the sharing and then seeing what's there then.
It was so interesting that just the 3 of us, I had an expectation that I was really going to be listened to already before anybody opened up their mouth. And that sort of set the stage already for a kind of feeling that had been possible if I hadn't known that we all were reaching for the same thing.
I think that's such an important thing, is the expectation that you go into something with. It's that focusing attitude. And we're going to be talking about how conversation and focusing are really parallel, with the same workings in a way. And so that attitude of openness, expecting that people will receive you, makes such a difference inside you and inside the conversation than when we go into a conversation, say with somebody from a different political group, or people that stand for something that we don't believe in, or something like that. And then you go into the group with this feeling like, oh, nobody's going to understand me, or nobody's going to listen to me. And it makes the whole atmosphere so different. So that feeling ahead of time, that anticipation of openness and curiosity makes all the difference. Anybody else, just what you observed?
Thing that came from me, and it still kind of resonate, is the oh, what's the word in English? I'm so sorry, it's late in France. Not having an expectation to achieve anything, or to, like, no goal, like we will, no conclusion, no big understanding, just being in it.
Yes, yes, yes. That's such a wonderful observation, that real conversation has no goal or conclusion, but it's about being in it. I love the way you said that, Anna. It's nice to see you. You know, I just want to say another word about that. In these crucial conversations that we have with people that we really want to impact, or people that we want to make connection with, or where the stakes are high, if we can go into those conversations with the feeling of, I'm just going to be in the conversation. I'm going to give up all my goals here, and I'm just going to be in the conversation. It's amazing how that works so much better.
That actually raised some concern for me, that I totally up to those like no go, like just be there conversation. And also there are times we need to make decision or things needs to be done. I'm more learning to hold the intentionality, but not kind of narrow down what could be possible just because I want something. Yeah, so that's the thing I felt like concerned, and and I'm also learning navigating that, how to still create that space even we have a common goal or have kind of things like that.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you, Olivia. That makes it much more intricate and subtle, isn't it? That you can have intentionality, even the intentionality to really be in the conversation, to deeply listen, to respond from your felt sense, to have a focusing attitude. Those are deep intentions. But to have intentions, but then also to sort of let them go, let them be free, let them have breath and space, not hold tightly to them. And it's a kind of double thing of holding your intentions and your values and your goals, holding them firmly, but holding them very lightly, and being willing to put them aside to really hear other people.
Yeah, those things strikes interesting something in me, like the happening that is the conversation now, like what is in intention, like when we're in a conversation, there are these words that we use, and as being focusers, we know that each time each person uses a word, it might mean a kind of slightly different thing. So it's like, as we kind of, I don't have more to say about that, but it comes up.
What I hear in that, Jonathan, is the words are important, but then, and the words are very individually important. They mean different things to each of us in different moments. But then there's something beyond the words, like what are we doing together? Like what are we doing right now in sharing what happened in the breakout rooms? Is that the direction you were going in?
That's a piece of it. I think, like, in the alive, it's like, I think there's like some part of me that's kind of like some jaded one who's like it's like a maybe a slightly younger jaded one that's like, oh, everyone's just like talking past each other, arguing about things because they're talking about different things or something. That, like, when I heard like Olivia, I don't think there was a miss all the ways it could have been in the word, in like the way, like remembering all the conversations I've had in the past where we would just argue about things and we never defined what intention meant or something. But it's like, can we even do that? Like defining, like that's kind of like a bad word, right? Is another bad word.
Yes, defining, nailing down. Do we even know what we mean by the word intention? And I think what we're aiming toward in a focusing conversation is something beyond the explicit level of defining and specific conclusions and intentions to this zigzag that Jane Genlin talks about, of dipping into this implicit level where the words are just handles for something so much more complex, and letting our bodies feel that complexity and letting ourselves be enveloped by the complexity that we can't hold in our minds, and seeing what that brings to us, and then bringing it up again to the level of words where we become touched by each other's words. And I'm wondering if in the exercise that we did, if there were moments when you were touched by someone else's words in some way that you could feel it. I see Abby nodding. What was your experience like, Abby?
Bad timing to take a bite of apple.
The apple looks good.
Yeah, there was just such a beautiful interplay in our conversation, and it's almost like every time each one of us spoke something, it evoked something deeper within. And the beautiful part is it ended up coming full circle. We ended up coming back towards where we started. So it's just such a beautiful, like, spiraling out and then coming back to where we started and then deepening within that process.
I love that image of the spiral where you're starting somewhere and then you come around to the same thing again from a deeper place. And then you may come around to it again. And I noticed that in so many areas in my life, this coming around to the same thing in another way. And it's not about, oh, here we are back to this again, but it's a whole different thing as we come back to it. One of the things that I was hoping that you would get from this exercise is the actual experience of how other people sharing impacts on your inner life, how what you start with changes as you're hearing other people. Then you may focus on the same thing and it will be very different because you're different after hearing this. And I would invite you to try this out in the next week, just with a focusing partner, with some friends, with a partner, just to focus, then to listen, and then to focus exactly the same thing and see how it's changed after listening. So we might try that again. I'm going to just make a few comments about living conversation, and then we're going to go back to talking about it, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to experiment again. Okay? Does that sound like a good
Lynn,
way
sorry.
of going?
Lynn, sorry. Before you go, could I say something just from before?
Sure.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't kind of figure out how to be seen. Just about safety felt very profound, and sort of not knowing what are sort of like to be in a kids bowling alley or something where there are bumpers, and sort of to have or to define, that would be one thing when you ask very at the beginning, what do we want about living conversations, to sort of, even in a felt sensing way, to know, something's unsafe, and how do I find my way sort of to glide back from it? And instead of something else taking over? And what are some things that can be either discovered or are guidelines or known, so that and that could be shared and sort of agreed to, like law in a way, but kind. So that, and then just how it changes so much everything, to just say to your other question, being with others and being companioned in this way. So being in that group where I could hear others sharing thoughtfully, honestly, and with curiosity in the focusing way, it became more, I felt like my own things were more dimensional, and that there was just, it wasn't alone. It was a place where things could grow and be and without shame, like have attention.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. That's really helpful. The conversation is the way that all of us are making the workshop together. So Rachel, you're saying that reminds me that all of us are coming into this saying conversation can be heaven, but it can be hell. Conversation can be the most dangerous thing. Conversation can kill us. It can squash us. Conversation is very complicated, and who am I to know how to navigate such an incredible force of nature? Right? Yeah, I mean, I have been in so many horrible conversations. I mean, all of us, right? There's the conversations where people are just going on and on and on, and you can't get a word in edgewise, and the conversations where everybody is denouncing everybody else, and the conversations where people are just hurling their points and their facts at each other, and nobody's receiving anything from each other, and the conversations where everybody is so predictable and constrained and polite that nothing that's real is ever being said. The conversations that are meant as cages, and this conversation is going to keep you in line. The conversations that are shaming, and the conversations that are meant to have some people be the in-group and some people be the out-group. All of them, right? They're the demons, the demon conversations. But I'm afraid we're not going to solve that problem tonight. You have to come back 2 more times for us to talk about safety, or how we can make a living conversation, hopefully, at least some pointers about it. But tonight our intention, as Olivia would say, is to get a felt sense of what we want, to have that in our bones. And that strengthens us. That empowers us. If we know what it can be. Many people in my life have given up. They don't feel that conversation can be living. They don't feel like you can have conversation with the other, whoever the other is in your life, whether it's the other in your personal life, your political life, your religious life, your cultural life. They've given up. It's like, don't even try. And what I want is for us not to give up. There is an incredible power and aliveness, vigor, and muscular strength in living conversation, and we need to remember it. We need to have it right there so that we can call on it. We may not always be able to create it or co-create it, but if we remember it, that gives us a resource that it's possible. And I really believe, I'm one of the few people of my peers that really believe that it is possible to have conversation across difference. And so we're first, getting the sense of what conversation can be. And then we'll talk about all those other things. Is that okay, Rachel?
Goodness, yes. And you answered my question in a way, because by getting a felt sense of it and getting it in our bones, that's organizing and orienting. If we know what is the living conversation, we can know what's safe, or what having something to opt for or steer towards or reset to instead of the default that's maybe in our bones by no electing it to be there.
Right, right. I mean, if we had a lot of time together, I would love to do an exercise of having you focus on a living conversation and then focus on an experience of a dead conversation or a demon conversation, a prison conversation, whatever your word would be, and to feel the difference in your body, and then come back to the living conversation feeling. But I wouldn't send you there tonight. We'll just have that around the edges. We'll say, oh, well, we'll deal with that next time. Tonight we get to have the living conversation. So I'm going to just make a couple of remarks about it, and then we'll go back to hearing what you have to say. One is that the living conversation has a life of its own. It is an organism. It's not just the individual entities. It's something that happens. It's a flow. When Jean says there may be two people or more people, more than two, but there's only one interaction. Let's take that in for a minute. It's so profound that no matter how many people we are, there's only one interaction. It may have infinite strands, infinite possibilities, infinite aspects, but it's one thing that we're all in together, that we're all doing like bees, doing something together. So it's something that has a life of its own. It is a something. The second point is that it's the interplay of usness. It's the way we experience that we are an us. The words aren't the only thing in it, of course. It's our whole expressions, pauses, body language, way of using the music of words, but it's our dance together. It's our human dance. And I did send you notes that you'll look at after this. Conversation is always surprising. If it's not surprising, it's not a living conversation. If you can predict it, even if you predict it in the way that you want it to go, and you say, oh, I know how to do this, I have this down. I'm going to say this. I'm going to say, will you marry me? And she's going to say yes. And then we're going to live happily ever after. If it's like that, then it's not the living conversation. All the romantic comedies have how different it can be than that way that it can be imagined. But it's always surprising, even moment to moment, even in ourselves. What we're going to say is a surprise to us. We don't know what we're going to say until we say it. We can only know it afterwards. And we can only know what it makes and what it does afterwards. I remember, Abby, when you said something in the community empowerment group, and you said, oh, I never should have said that. It wasn't a good thing to say. And I felt like what you had said had changed the whole tone of what was happening in that moment. But you couldn't know that, and maybe even feel, we don't know. when we're saying something, what the impact is, what it means. We can only know in how it plays out and what happens with it. Then I want to say, a living conversation is courageous. It's risk-taking. It's saying those things that you don't know if it's the right thing to say. It's not being careful. It's being caring. And there's such a difference between being caring and being careful. When you're caring, you're always ready to clean up what hasn't come out right, you know, what's been hurtful in what you've said, even though you didn't mean it that way, that somebody could be hurt by it. And you're not invested in what you said. You're invested in the meaning of it, the deeper meaning. And you say, oh, I'm so sorry it came out like that. I didn't mean that. What I meant was this. And I said this because I feel this and I've experienced this. So that courageousness of taking a risk, but always being ready. And Jean Genlin was so good at this, always being ready. Oh, don't listen to that. That's not what I meant. It's this that I'm trying to say. Okay. Well, a living conversation is like focusing in that it requires many of the same things, if not all of the same things that focusing does. Jean actually said that a real conversation, what he thought was the only good conversation, is a conversation where there's room to ask another person, what did you mean by that? And I thought that was such a wonderful statement, because we could even measure the life of a conversation by that. Is there room to say, what did you mean by that? Is there curiosity enough to say, what did you mean by that? So a living conversation requires the pause. And the pause is so important because it's this space to make that transition, to go into the implicit, to find that larger self, and then to bring those words to translate. Somebody?
Can I just break in there?
Yeah, please.
Two things. One, if you can say a little bit more about listening with the body, which is part of the call to the living conversation. And you name that as the ingredient, being listening with the body, listening to the deeper point, and listening to the music, not just the word, which I kind of feel that you have touched on, but I'm not so quite sure about the part of listening with the body. And then the next thing is the tyranny of the clock. It's 7:15 almost. So just want to alert you to that.
Thank you. Thank you, Isabel. Yes, listening with the body. I mean, some people think about it as listening literally, that your body is alert to what you're feeling with your body, what people are saying. Other people aren't in touch with their bodies in that way. They may be listening to the atmosphere or to the vibes that we used to say in the 70s or something. But it's not just listening to the words. It's listening to the deeper thing that the person is trying to say. And it's listening to this is the complex part that we're going to take some time to get to. It's listening not just to the particular things that are said, but to all of these things that go together, like the ingredients of a casserole. And some of them you may not like. you know, some of the ingredients to the casserole might be too spicy for you, or too this or to that. But you're listening to the flow of the whole thing. You're listening to where it's going. And that's a whole thing that's a very, very different thing. And it's difficult to listen to the words and listen to the music, to watch the dance while dancing. And that's what we're going to try to learn over the 3 weeks. We're not going to have it right away unless it comes naturally to you. And some people, it comes naturally to you. I was telling Isabel that comes naturally to her. It's like a communal language that's in her bones. But many of us, we have to really learn it. Just like focusing, it comes very naturally to some people, and other people have to have steps to get to it. The last thing I want to say is that a living conversation is not about the about. It's not about the content. It's about the evolution. It's about where it's going. It's about the feelings. It's about the connection. And it's about how we're bouncing off each other, or you don't even know if bouncing is the right word, how we're taking in each other and becoming each other, and becoming a something new with the ingredients of each other. So I'm just going to take a breath here and invite you to take a breath. And then before we have any comments, we're going to do another breakout room experiment, because then I think the comments will come from a richer place with the experience. So this time you're going to be in groups of 4, and we're going to start all together with the focusing. And then this is going to be the tricky part. We're not going to take turns. We're going to be together for 15 minutes. Let's say 12 minutes. We're going to be together for 12 minutes, because I couldn't decide between 10 or 15. And then you'll let me know which is better afterwards, in hindsight. So we'll be together for 12 minutes, and each person will come in the way they want to come in, with something in mind about really listening, really saying your own truth, trying to be succinct in what you say so that you're leaving room for other people, trying to be with your own felt sense, be listening to what the other person is trying to get at, rather than just the words. And we're going to see what happens in that 12 minutes, see what evolves, what we make in 12 minutes. And then we're going to come back together and we're going to focus on that, on what we made. Okay? So it's no right or wrong here. It's just seeing what evolves, what, as we said, we don't hold the conversation holds us. And let's see how it's making itself, using us as ingredients. Are you all up to that experiment? Okay. I see Kate nodding, up for that. Okay. I will see you in 12 minutes, and we'll wait for Isabel. I think, Isabel, we can just randomly, because this is sort of a random thing here, have people in groups of 4. And I'll see you in 12 minutes. Oh, before you go, let's just do the focusing together before you go, okay? That's a good thing to do. So Isabel will be already setting up the breakout rooms, And we'll be taking a moment to breathe, to reconnect with our bodies, with our individual selves, with our inner life, which of course isn't just inside us, but we call it the inner life, with what I call I, me, what's there right now in me. And just take a moment there to see. How are you? What are you? Where are you right now? Just whatever is there. Maybe find a word or a sentence or a handle for that me-ness. And then we're going to speak from that, but not take turns in our breakout rooms that will be the usness. So we're getting the sense here of the me and then of the unpredictable, surprising dance of the us. Okay, now we're ready to have our breakout rooms. So how was that? Who would like to share what happened? Before we share what happened, let's just focus on it together for a minute, okay? Just process it together for a minute. Let's take that time to breathe. Notice how we're sort of doing this zigzag of going inside and then coming out to each other and then going inside and staying in touch with ourselves and then the small group and then the large group. So we're trying to keep all of that fluid. So just digest that 12-minute conversation together. And this time we're not going to be thinking right now about what it meant to us, but what it was like. What was this thing that we gave birth to? What was its shape? What was the felt sense of this dance that happened? See if there's an image or felt sense words, a metaphor. Was it flowing? Was it tentative? Was it awkward? Was it chaotic? I mean, it wasn't one thing, of course. Just see what words come to you. And what was the flow of it? How did it move forward? See if you could remember some of the sequences of what led to what. This person said this, and then that led to that. I'm just saying things. You'll have your own way of processing the conversation as a whole. But I'll just say things to give you a little help. What was the most alive moment in the conversation? The most connected moment? What made that moment particularly alive?
Lynn's Karen. At one point in the interaction, the four of us were kind of moving at the same time. I mean, in different ways, but moving at the same time. And there was just something about, like, it was like this rhythmic, like, co-regulation.
I love that, the co-regulation of feeling like everybody is moving together.
So Lynn, the thing that came to me was the word that came of our group, and we were only 3, which I think says something, was kindness. And it came because I wasn't even aware of it, but I was doing this. And then somebody else in our group noticed that she also was doing that. And then we talked about that we wouldn't be in this group without some kind of trust. And somebody elaborated on that to say trust not only of ourselves to be comfortable in the group, but trust of the others in the group to be non-judgmental or kind. So I think that had a lot to do with our intimacy and our confidence. And when you ask for a bright moment, for me, it came when, and I'm sorry, I should know her name. The other person in our group was, if she can just tell me her name, said that she was thinking about moving to Western Mass. Well, that lit me up like because we live in Western Mass and we'd love to have lots of people moving to Western Mass. So that was my bright moment. Thank you.
Thank you. So the felt sense, and maybe you would give the name kindness to your group. Maybe we could all find a name for our group. It'd be interesting if people would probably have different names for the same group. But think about what would be the name that you would have for your group. Anybody else?
Lynn, can I say?
Oh, everybody can, please. You don't need my permission.
For our little group, the word or the image that came to me was that our conversation was like a flower opening up. And
Good.
it was delicious and beautiful and tender. It felt like each petal was like another kind of leg of the conversation, you know, another one kind of lifted up and opened up. And it's just very beautiful, surprising to me.
Your name would be Flower. Was there a moment there, Susan?
The moment, yes, that for me, it was like an invitation. Susan D said, well, I won't say what she said, but she said something that I also felt that was brave of her to say, and gave me an entree. And then I felt like I really could be there. And then other people in turn did the same thing. So thank you.
What a wonderful description that is. Let's really take that in, that the alive moment was an invitation, and that it was someone saying something a little brave that enabled you to say your truth. And that's a way that conversation works, is if somebody takes a little risk, not leaps off a cliff. I mean, you know, there's a difference between going to the edge and going over the edge. So the person that's making the living conversation moment is taking a little risk, and that opens the way for other people to really come in there with their truth.
I have something that I would call our group the Explorers Club. That we were 4 people as explorers who were starting out with no direction and no map, and that we were just sort of putting one foot in front of the other to find whatever wherever it was going to lead us to, you know, not really the top of a mountain, but, you know, somewhere that we would find some form of the gold or the prize. And that we were tentative at first and then became more sure that we were in fact on a path to somewhere.
Oh, I love that, the Explorers Club.
Yeah, that's
Really
good.
knowing that that we can't predict, and that we don't know the outcome. We don't know the outcome of even what we're going to say. Yeah, that's so beautiful.
I don't know if everybody would agree with me in my club, in my club.
Well, I think that that's an important part of the living conversation, is that we don't want everybody to agree, because then you don't have the dance really. The dance is made of the tension between agreeing and disagreeing. The dance is made of the flow of something being evocative. And if everybody agrees, then there won't be anything unpredictable. We'll all just agree and sit around agreeing. I think that's a big problem that we have in our culture, that a lot of people just stay with people that they agree with, and they sit around agreeing, and often agreeing with how awful things are and impossible to change things are. Maybe that's not always true, but the idea of, well, one of the people in one of our workshops said, it's so good to be with like-minded people. That's what we need. And somebody else said, it might have been Shakafe, or someone else said, well, what if we're not all like-minded? What if we don't all agree? Then we don't want to be together? And how like-minded is like-minded? So I just want to encourage you that everybody in your club not agreeing will be a good thing.
I was in her club. But what was coming, I love the Explorers Club, but what was coming to me was something like the truthfulness club, something like that there was on Jane's part, really, of the bravery of talking about the process from the beginning. You know, talking about what's happening now, not just a historic.
Yes, wonderful. I mean, the Truthiness Club is made out of that most important ingredient that's so rare in our culture. And I call that ingredient talking about you and me. And people don't do that unless they're in love, or maybe with a small child. People don't talk about the immediacy of what's happening between us, how we're impacting each other. And it's so intimate to do that. To say, well, when you said that, I felt this, or as you say that, I feel, or I want to tell you that. Those kinds of immediate you and me ingredients make all the difference in the world.
I was in part of the flower group. And it was interesting for me because I took in what everyone said, and at first my reaction was not that I didn't agree, but that I don't know. It's not that I didn't like it or didn't, maybe I just didn't like it, maybe. But the more I sat with it and the more I listened to it, I realized that the part that I didn't like was because it recognized me in that same situation. So it then gave me the ability to really sit with it and then shift out and then talk about what I was, what came for me. So it was really like a flower dancing sort of in the wind,
Yeah.
So,
That's really quite powerful, is to sit with something and then to feel, instead of, there's one step of saying, well, I don't really like this. And then another step of saying, well, what is it for me? What does it bring? What does this do in me? And then to allow that to have an impact. Let's have just one more
Very
comment.
powerful.
Someone was just about to say something.
If nobody is, I'll say something. This is Martha. And speaking from my own experience, it was as if we were maybe little children and you had given us this thing to look at. And we were like, what is this? Oh, what if you turn it this way? What if you turn it this way? And we were each saying, oh, this is what I see. Oh, well, I see this. Well, how does this look like to you? And comparing it to, but it could be this, like balls. It looks kind of like a ball, but it's not a ball. And how's it different from other balls? So it was a lot of questioning and openness, I guess. I don't know what the word would be.
It seems very akin to the focusing attitude, right? Of curiosity and openness, sort of like what the Buddhists call beginner's mind. Think of all the blind men with the elephant saying, what is this elephant? It's like a this, it's like a that. I love that image. I want to take just a moment to see now, what about this whole conversation of the large group? How has that evolved? How does that feel different now, this us, this big us, than it did at the beginning? We've had several different experiences here. And what does it feel like now? Anybody just respond.
Yes. I would like to share, Lynn, that at the beginning of the group, I was connecting with how much I hate these Zoom groups. And no matter, it's so lovely to see my playfully and lovely friend Paulita, and you, and my wonderful teacher Charlotte, and also Rachel, and familiar faces. I was like, oh my God, I hate Zoom. I hate not to be in touch with you and in person, and being able to be together and touching each other and sensing each other. And now, after the two different playful interactions that I have with the two different groups, and the second one I was with Martha, I feel something alive in me, like something trying to form, and something different in my body.
Wow. Wow. So out of the dead Zoom, something arose from the ashes there. Something different in your body. Yes, I really resonate with that. I hate Zoom. And then something happens where people aren't just in their boxes anymore. They come alive. It's quite amazing that that happens because, you know, it's a screen, but it's not a screen anymore. We become alive to each other.
Can I jump in some of the boxes? I would like to jump in Paulita's box right now. Yeah.
Box. I love that we're transcending our boxes. The Zoom era has really added new meaning to that idea of thinking outside the box, living outside the box. Anybody else? What does the group feel like now?
No, I feel more freedom and closer to, I mean, and I mean, I don't like Zoom either, but just the immediacy of able to get together this way, it's unbelievable. And for me to be able to be with Lynn, you know, from Florida, so I think it's great. And everybody, but just yeah, it's unbelievable. But you know, there is the limitations, I guess, right?
Yes. Yes, I'm glad to be with you too. I hope you'll forgive this sort of didactic part of me, this part of me that wants to make sure that you take home, you know, the main points that we have for this part one of the workshop. And so I want to make sure that you take home the ingredients that are similar in focusing and conversation. I mean, it seems to people like focusing is very different gesture, you know, where you mostly close your eyes and you go inside yourself. And conversation is opening yourself to other people. And yet when we think about the idea that we aren't separate entities, but we are made out of interaction, that interaction can be on different levels. We can have the interaction with ourselves and all of the parts of ourselves and how they're interacting in the moment, or the interaction with me and this room and this technology and this water I'm drinking. It can be the interaction with my partner, or it can be the interaction with the group, the interaction with my culture, the interaction with this time and place of history, with interaction with all the past. We are this interactive process, and conversation is the medium of that interaction. And the interaction, to be alive, has these ways about it, where it needs space to settle into the body, to feel what you feel. It needs the ingredient of openness. And of course, we're not going to be open all the time, but maybe coming back to finding some curiosity, some openness, some ability to listen, some desire to be surprised, some adventure. And that's very much the same with focusing and with conversation. And that listening to ourselves, listening to the other, and then this dimension that I'm introducing, which is to listen to the group, not just the individuals in the group, but to listen to the group as a whole of the us that we are always becoming. So that's my little summary statement. So thank you all for all of the contributions to this that we've made. And I'll see you next week.